The meeting will come to order. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Weininger?
Here.
Mr. Melody?
Here.
Mr. Harris? Here. Mrs. May?
Here.
And Mr. Valentine?
Here. Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Stark, will you lead us this evening, please? Approval of the regular minutes. Recommended approval of the August 9th, 2021 regular meeting minutes. Is there a motion?
Sec.
Moved by Mr. Harris, second by Mrs. May. Questions, comments? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Harris? Yes. Mrs. May?
Yes.
Mr. Melody?
Yes.
Mr. Weininger?
Yes.
And Mr. Valentine?
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Approval of the regular work session minutes from the August 23rd, 2021 meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Weininger. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Harris. Questions or comments? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Weininger?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Melody?
Abstain.
Mrs. May?
Yes.
And Mr. Valentine?
Yes, motion passes 4-0. Mr. Melody abstains as he was absent at that meeting. Presentation, Dr. Marshausen.
Agenda.
The agenda, skipping ahead. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Melody. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Weininger. Questions, comments? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Melody?
Yes.
Mr. Weininger?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mrs. May?
Yes.
And Mr. Valentine?
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Presentation, Dr. Marshausen.
Thank you, Mr. Valentine. At this time, I will share the latest information from our COVID dashboard and provide a COVID update to the Board of Education. In the last 2 weeks, some information to share with the board and the community. Last week, our Superintendent's Medical Advisory Committee met, and we talked about the remaining mitigation steps that could be taken within our district if necessary. And we have talked from the beginning about following our local data. And the Medical Advisory Committee asked that we look at 3 things as we continue on this journey and we continue as a district to navigate COVID-19. The 3 things that we will consider when we look at potentially asking high school students to wear universal masks are the community case count per 100,000, the percentage of spread that our nurses are able to trace to internal spread versus external spread. Right now, we see very little internal spread when it comes to contact tracing. In fact, the vast majority of contact tracing is taking place outside of school. And then also a continued look at absentee rates. The group talked specifically about how not relying on one data point is important, how we need to look at least 3 different data points. There is great concern among our physicians committee, not so much with where we are, but where we are as a greater Columbus community. And as we look at our hospital capacities, and as we look at where we are as a county, Mayor Ginther issuing a mandate in the city of Columbus, and we had lengthy talks about the Columbus vaccination rate still being the 40 percentile, and our Dublin vaccination rate. The consensus as a group is right now we are where we are because of the percentage of vaccinated individuals in our Dublin community. We are now able to see the vaccination rates for our partners in Union County and in Delaware County, and they are similar to the vaccination rates in 43016 and 43016 and 43017. So we have high vaccination rates, and that's what's allowing us to keep doing what we're doing. Also, during the last 2 weeks, we've made some changes in our elementary and middle school lunches. For those people who are consistently looking at our dashboard, we know that we had a situation with lunches at Davis Middle School, and we have taken steps to provide additional spacing at Davis Middle School, thanks to Mr. Stark and our team, and to our administrators for being able to work through that and to create more space where possible at our middle schools and elementary schools. Also, just to provide for the board and the community, the presidential order for our mandatory vaccines does not impact public schools. So that is a specific part of the president's order that was left to governors, and it was specifically called out for employees that's where that will be. So in the last 2 weeks, we continue to look at this data. We continue to make changes where changes are necessary. As of right now, we have 770 mask exemptions, and those are as of today, and that counts for 6.7% of the students. This information is now posted on our dashboard. At the PTO presidents meeting last week, our PTO presidents asked that the dashboard be updated more than once a week. So beginning this week on Thursday, the dashboard will also be updated on Thursdays. One of the reasons for that is because we have kiddos who may have been quarantined on Tuesday who would have come off quarantine on Saturday or Sunday and never be captured on the dashboard. So this will allow us to make sure that we are accurately representing the students who may be quarantined or put in modified quarantine. The other thing that's important to see on our dashboard, and this is just a clarification for the folks who are here and who will later be watching this recording, is that the dashboard is active cases, it's not cumulative. So we're going to see the Davis numbers come down, and we've already started to see some of those Davis numbers come down as those students recover and come back into our school, as the quarantine students test negatively and come back into our school. Those numbers will continue to fluctuate or remain, as we've seen, in a relatively stable position. When we look at our active case count now, our active case count is 101 students. And as of this afternoon, we are looking at 16 high school students who are active quarantine cases. And as you can see from Davis, that number was 25 earlier. We anticipate that number will continue to come down. At our elementary schools, the high is 6 as we look at where those cases are. And again, as we contact trace the majority of these cases are contact traced to outside of school. This is similar to what we see in other districts across Central Ohio. When we look at other districts across Central Ohio, the large suburban districts, Dublin, Olentangy, and New Albany, have by far the lowest number of high school cases. We are also the 3 districts that do not have high school mask mandates. Why are we in this position? Because our vaccination rates are high. And that's protecting our students both in and outside of school. When we talk to our peers in other districts, their contact tracing is pointing to the same thing that ours is. The behavior outside of school for our high school students is what is leading to high school spread in other districts, even when they do have mask mandates. So right now, if we're saying we're following our local data, this number of high school cases has been consistent since the start of the school year. And I do not believe it points to the need to necessitate a change among our high school processes. When we look at our quarantines, we have a high number of quarantine students right now. We have 230 students who are quarantined. When we look at our elementary schools, many of these quarantine students are students who have a mask exemption, who are close contacts to students inside of a classroom. And one of the things we have said, and this isn't Dr. Marshausen speaking, this isn't the Dublin City School Board speaking, we don't control the quarantine process. So if a parent chooses for their child to not be masked in elementary school and they're a close contact to a student who is COVID positive, that student who's not wearing a mask will be quarantined. The other problem we've struggled with this, and you can see Davis with 37 cases, we've struggled at lunch. And some of our buildings are more of a challenge than others. We have engaged our elementary principals and empowered them to make changes where possible without creating a significant disruption to the educational process. So as we talk about adapting and adjusting, we continue to adapt and adjust in our lunch setup, in our classrooms, to control what we can control. We have those students who have mask exemptions. That's something that it's a parent choice. We understand that, but those students are opening themselves up to not only quarantines, but successive quarantines. We have had some parents withdraw their mask exemption because the student has been quarantined and they want the kiddo to stay in school and they don't want them quarantined on successive weeks, months, and so forth. When we look at modified quarantine, these are our students who are either a close contact and they are wearing a mask in the school setting, or they are students who are vaccinated. If you look at Kaufman High School, we currently have 19 students at Kaufman High School in modified quarantine. These are vaccinated students who were a close contact. And we have 2 flipped. Is that recent where we were? I think we've had, as of Thursday when we looked, we had 2 quarantined kids flip out of all of those kids. One of my concerns is we have 230 kids sitting home right now, and if our numbers hold, 225 of them are just sitting at home. And they're quarantined and sitting at home because we are not seeing flipped cases. But we will follow the health department's rules and regulations when it comes to quarantine because that's within their legal boundaries at this point. But we are not seeing students who are quarantined flip to be positive cases.
Do you mean modified quarantine or regular quarantine?
Either.
Either, okay.
To high school. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
The vast majority of those kids who are home quarantined will come back after a negative test. And we still have thousands of negative tests. When a student gets quarantined, after 5 days, they are able to take that test, and if it's negative, come back after 7 with no symptoms. So a student who's quarantined can limit it to missing a week of in-person instruction versus 2 weeks of in-person instruction with a negative test. And our negative tests are proctored online. It's not something that someone can falsify or fake. It is through a medical process that those tests are done. So we're able to continue to do that. So at this time, members of the board, I'm not recommending a change in the process where we are now. We will continue to monitor these numbers. I think we are incredibly blessed that our community has listened to the health professionals and received their vaccinations. We continue to learn new information about the Delta variant, and the information that's being shared recently has been more assuring that our vaccinated students and our vaccinated teachers are in a place that there's a high level of protection for them. So I do not recommend any changes at this time to our current masking rules or regulations. I'll take any questions from the board.
So thank you for the update. One of the tools we had last year in our toolbox was the mitigation strategies, the surveys that we were doing randomly of building personnel. Obviously, those strategies have changed somewhat, but what would be the process if an employee or even a parent would have a suggestion or a concern about something that's being done? Would they contact the principal? Would they contact public relations? Or?
I think as with any concerns or complaints, we want those directed to the lowest level. So if a parent at first has a concern with something that's happening in a classroom, we'd want that directed to the teacher. If it's a mitigation process that is not as simple as a question, then it would go to the building principal, and we would then work that up the line. If it, while we get a lot of emails right now and we're not able to respond to all of them, we read all of them. So suggestions or concerns. Mr. Melody, what we're seeing now is a lot of kind of repetitive things. So when we get new information, we of course consider that. We saw something at Davis that was obviously greatly concerning, and it led us to make changes not only at Davis but at other schools. And we're going to have to adapt and adjust. So we still continue with all those layered mitigation strategies. We are incredibly fortunate that we have the highly rated air filtration systems at our building. We continue to do the deep cleaning at our buildings. In our classrooms, we maintain as much physical space as possible. 94% of our elementary students are masked. We've asked our teachers that when they're in close contact with the students to be masked. But we also know that being able to see someone's face does have a significant impact on the learning process. So our first concern is keeping our kids healthy and in school. But we also know that being able to communicate clearly is important. So we work that process as much as possible.
Dr. Marchhausen, with the executive order from the Columbus mayor, did that affect any of our Columbus schools?
The executive order does not pertain to our public schools in the
Okay.
city of Columbus.
Okay,
And
thank
we
you.
received legal clarification on that today.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any additional questions or comments? All right, there being none, public participation for action items on the agenda. None. We will have public participation for action items not on the agenda at the tail end of the meeting. Board President, Board of Education comments. All right. Moving on to Superintendent's comments.
It's coming. There are just 4 things that I'd like to share with the Board of Education tonight. The district is putting an annual customer satisfaction survey in the field today with Fallon Research. This is a survey that was not done in the last year because of COVID, but something that has been an annual process for the Dublin City School District. It is a scientific survey that allows us to see where our community is. I'm very interested to see the results in this year's Fallon survey. I think the board is familiar with Paul Fallon and the work that Fallon Research has done in the past. We do have about 10 to 12 longitudinal questions that will allow us to compare where we are in 2021 to where we were pre-COVID with our community satisfaction with the school district. So those results will be shared with the board, and they will be shared in a public meeting with our community when that information is back at the end of the survey. Secondly, we launched today a partnership, and this is a trial partnership with a company called Thought Exchange. And what Thought Exchange allows us to do as a community is to share ideas. Those ideas get rated by everyone who's part of the Thought Exchange itself. You can go back and rate more ideas over the course of the week. I think when I looked today, we had upwards of 400 comments already made. And this Thought Exchange is designed to help us as a district enumerate what is the purpose, what is the mission of the Dublin City Schools. It has been since 2007 since we had a strategic plan. It has been several years since we've updated our mission and vision. Where do we want to be? The Dublin community has a robust master plan through the city that takes us to 2035. And I think it would be appropriate for the school district to take the time to engage our community to say, where do we want to be a decade from now? What is the purpose of the Dublin City Schools? So we are asking parents, you are invited to participate in that thought exchange. One of the things that anyone who's watching this, I hope that we can agree, masking isn't what we're looking for. I think there were 30 questions saying, put on masks. That's not a 10-year vision. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for what is the purpose and mission of our community. Why do people move here? Why are we one of the fastest growing school districts in the state of Ohio? And how do we come together around a purpose for what we get to do each and every day with 16,500 kiddos and growing? So I'm hopeful people will give some thought to what it is that we want out of our school district as we work on this process together. There were a group of folks who came together with Tim Kite, who presented to the board about a week and a half ago, to start enumerating and identifying what are the values that drive the Dublin City Schools. Our value isn't masks. Our value isn't critical race theory. There's so much that brings us together. And I think when we get folks in a room to say, why did you move to Dublin and what do you want for your school district, the things that bring us together are much stronger than the things that pull us apart. And I think we need to focus on that. So that's one of my goals, is to get the focus beyond what's right here, right now, and get the focus on where do we want to be. There have been a couple questions about controversial issues policies, and I would invite anyone in the community to take a look at Board Policy 2240 on controversial issues. We have been working on this with our teachers. We have been providing clarification. When Dr. Bailey presents in a little while about the work that we're doing in our curriculum, we are focused on curriculum and teaching our content to our kiddos. We are not interested in indoctrination, jumping into controversial issues. And of course, in U.S. history class, we're going to talk about U.S. history. It belongs in U.S. history class. And of course, in health education, we're going to talk about health education issues. It belongs in our health classes. But for those folks who are trying to pull us apart, who are looking for wedge issues, we're going to clean up where we've had some errors. We're going to focus on curriculum, and we're going to focus on providing an elite education to the students in the Dublin City Schools. And that's what we want to be able to do. And then finally, it would be improper if I didn't mention this before. I throw this to Mr. Stark in a little bit. In case anybody has students at Jerome, we've got an overcrowding problem. We're teaching classes in hallways at Jerome High School. And part of the 2018 levy promise was to get rid of the modulars. And one of the things that I'm asking the board to approve tonight is additional modulars at Jerome. Now, those additional modulars at Jerome are for 1 year and 1 year only. Because at the same time we're going to ask for approval for modulars at Jerome for the 22-23 school year, we're also interviewing architects to put the addition on Jerome High School, and the addition on Jerome High School would open in the fall of 2023. So for those Jerome parents, I break this into 3 needs. There's an immediate need, and we can't put the addition on in time to solve the immediate need. So I'm asking the board to declare an urgent necessity tonight that would allow us to go get those modular classrooms and have them set up for next school year. It's a 1-year fix. That's the immediate need. Short-term need is an addition on Jerome High School that the money was approved. The bonds haven't been issued, but the money was approved in 2018. That will allow us to get rid of all of the modulars at Jerome High School by the start of the 23 school year. And then as a community, we're going to have a conversation. If the numbers in Jerome Village, which were supposed to be 100, 150 homes a year, which in reality are 300 plus new homes every year, If they continue at this pace, we're going to have a conversation as a community about what do we want. Do we want high schools of 2,400, or do we want to have a conversation about a fourth high school? And if we go down that road, that's not a John decision, that's not a board decision, that's an us conversation. But before we can get to the us, we are at a flashpoint where we have to take action now. COVID kind of forced some of these decisions down the road, so we've got to embrace the discomfort about doing what needs to be done now as we plan for what's going to be next. I know there were some conversations about adding on to both Jerome and Scioto, but if there's a fourth high school that's even part of the conversation, shifting kids over to Scioto, then potentially shifting them back, if we got to the point where we wanted to do that, doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. So we can put those classrooms on there now, we can make the changes now that will get us through the next 4 to 5 years. And during that time, we can't spin our wheels a lot about the what's next. Because if we continue to grow at this rate, and part of me takes great pride that we're growing at this rate. People are willing to spend top dollar for homes in the Dublin City School District. That's why they're moving here, is for us. And that's a great sense of pride. But it's going to take some planning and working and having conversations. So later when Mr. Stark talks the nuts and bolts, he's going to talk the operational issues about what can make this take place. From a political and leadership standpoint, that's how we've gotten to where we are. To handle what could be a crisis situation with overcrowding right now, and to have a plan moving forward that is able to address those issues. I'll take any questions from the board.
No questions, comments? We've obviously been receiving a good deal of information on all four of those topics, and there's quite a bit ahead of us, especially as it relates to the fourth item that you mentioned. So we'll get around to more discussion on that when Mr. Stark gives his presentation a little bit later. Moving on to Treasurer's Office.
Just a few action items this evening. We do have 2 transfers. One transfer is our annual athletic fund transfer for safety supplies and such to our middle schools and high schools. The other transfer is just closing out at Jerome and Scioto High School, the class of 2021, and moving those monies to the class of 2022s. These are funds that are raised by the students as part of different fundraising activities to support some of the stuff that they're doing as part of those classes. We have some appropriation changes. This is just kind of, we had some DEF grants awarded. We had some, and otherwise grant funds just trying to balancing out to what was been allocated. We have a few donations from Dublin Women's Club to Kaufman Robotics, Riverside PTO to Riverside Elementary for some benches in their courtyard, and a donation from Grizel, anonymous donation for purchase some uniforms and some special needs equipment that were donated to the district to be used. So other than that, one thing I would point out is John was correct. While it's been authorized, we have not issued those bonds yet for the addition at Jerome. That would be something we'd be looking to do, probably coming with for year authorization, probably in December, and then we would look to issue after the first of the calendar year. So just for looking ahead. Other than that, is there any questions?
All right, there being no questions, it's recommended by the Treasurer of the Board of Education approve items 6B, 6C, 6D, 6E, and 6F. Is there a motion?
So moved?
Moved by Mr. Melody.
Second.
Second by Mrs. May. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Melody?
Yes.
Mrs. May?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Weininger?
Yes.
And Mr. Valentine?
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Department of Academics and Student Learning.
Turn that on. Good evening, members of the board. Amongst all of the talk and challenges we've had this summer about COVID, Dr. Tanya Bailey, our Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, has been working very hard with our building principals, looking at data, considering if we have any areas of regression or enrichment that are necessary for our students. So she is going to present to you tonight about our district goals at the building level for teaching and learning.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Bailey. I'm the Executive Director for Teaching and Learning. And one of the things about this work here, which was exciting for me, is my transition moving from being a principal in a different district to now here, getting an opportunity to get into the buildings, meet the principals, see the community, see the buildings, and it was very exciting for me. One of the things that I met with the executive cabinet before determining the goals, it was very important for me to see where principals were and where they landed for the 21-22 before determining for the 2021 school year. With COVID and all the other decisions that we've had to make as principals, I wanted to see where they were at before deciding on our instructional focus for this school year. And again, one of the things I was really excited about was meeting the principals at their building individually, and some of them with their leadership team. So it was exciting for me. There were three things that I was looking for when I did speak with them, and one of them, of course, is where they landed with this 2021 building goals. Expanding their existing goals and continuing with the same focus, revising the existing goals and changing the focus, and begin with a completely different focus goal for the school year. It varied between all of them, but it was great feedback for me to determine what steps to move forward. Something else that came about in the conversation was the template that they used for the 2021 school year that they found to be very cumbersome, at times confusing, and very difficult to present to staff when they're talking about their goals. So I took those things into consideration and determined, and using the district profile of a learner and the feedback from our principals to guide the discussion and determination for our 21-22 focus for teaching and learning. And there are two items: student learning and student experience. The student learning focus, students achieve their full potential while actively participating in their own learning through challenging, engaging, and relevant experiences. The student experience, students feel safe, valued, supported, engaged, and included in the school environment that is equitable. From there, using the profile of a learner, it was determined, I said to the principals, 3 goals. 2 of them must be, one has to be a student learning goal, one needs to be a student experience goal, and the third one could be one of their choice, student learning or student experience. But the 3 match up to our profile of a learner. One in the area of knowledge, one in the area of skills, and one in the area of character. The other thing I wanted to just remind the principals is that I can't develop their goals for them. They have to live their goals. They are our instructional leaders. So all I simply said was, you determine this with your building leadership team. Collect the data, and let's see what your goals will be for this year. One of the things that they will have to do is write SMART goals, and that's really important. They have to provide action steps and progress monitoring. One of the things that I'm going to do this year is meet with each principal monthly to support them in this process, to support them as they achieve their goals in the building. This is an example of the new template. It just goes through the learning targets, assessment, and differentiation, which everyone should be working on in the district. This is not a separate goal for each building to determine. And then it talks about our focus for teaching and learning. And here's where the principals needed to determine student learning, student experience, write their SMART goal, building action plan, and progress monitoring. These goals are due by October 1st, and that's the first day of the progress monitoring with me. And progress monitoring is simply to support the student learning, but definitely those principals in their process. Do I have any questions?
Yes.
Yes.
With the diversity of our buildings in lots of different categories, you anticipate many of the goals between different buildings being very different. Would you agree with that?
Yes, and that was purposeful because it's the instructional leader's focus to determine what's best for their building. To give them the exact same focus, exact same goal, is not doing the building any good. For example, if I'm in Dublin, Kaufman, and a student experience needs to look different than that in Jerome. And so the principal has to determine based upon data. Now they know I was really driving the data. Based upon data, panorama data, map data, instructional rounds, what do you think and what do you see a need to improve in? And I've gotten some really good goals so far.
So the process, to me, it looks kind of like it's grassroots up to the top rather than top down.
Exactly.
In terms of assigning goals to buildings. That's a great way to do it. Thank you.
Exactly. Because what I told them is it's not me living them. I'm going
Right.
to come support them through the process. They have to live it every day with their building leadership team, with their staff, with their parents, with their students to see growth in the areas that they see that they need to grow in. So that was a focus.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yes.
I just want to say thank you for getting us back on track. It's awesome.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Anyone else? Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to item 8. It's recommended by the superintendent, the Board of Education approve the attached approval agreement with Spirit of Peace Clinical Counseling. Questions or comments? Call the roll, please. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Weiniger. Is there a second? Second by Mrs. May. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Weiniger?
Yes.
Mrs. May?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Melody?
Yes.
And Mr. Valentine?
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Mr. Stark.
Good evening, everyone. Take a quick minute before I start talking about these modulars. On tonight's Brian's agenda, you're going to see there's a resignation for Amy Saleh, who's a leader of our bus transportation coordination. Amy has decided to move on and do some other things. I just want to publicly, the amount of gratitude and appreciation we have for what Amy does. If anyone knows Amy, the hours she works, incredible. It's an incredible amount of hours. And her dedication to student safety has been unmatched. She's been a joy to work with. She's greatly going to be missed. I just wanted to say a couple words so everyone knows she was really something. So I wish her all the best in whatever she decides to do moving forward. But her work here is she's really made a difference. So that said, on the board agenda tonight, you're going to see that we have a recommendation that the board approve this resolution for waiving competitive bidding. So those board members, you all know me. I've never asked to waive competitive bidding ever. Actually bid everything possible. I've even bid things that don't need to be bid. But when it comes to modulars, which requires public bidding, typically a school is given more than a year to procure, to do the designing and installation of modulars. Dublin City Schools had had some bad luck with installing modulars in the past. You could see the last set at Jerome, I think, took 2.5 years, I think, when they finally landed down. We are confident that we can get this in ready for next year. But to publicly bid something requires a number of steps. Even working quickly, we would need to RFQ a designer. We would need to make sure that people have these in stock and they have the right one that we're designing. There's a front-end documents that need to be made with legal, notice time given, and with the aggressive timetable on, we would lose about 8 weeks. So what we did instead, because I still like to keep things very competitive, and I want to make a shout out to Kevin Klingler, who works in our group. He was able to put together this RFP, a request for proposal, very quickly, and he built a very solid budget that we have here tonight, too. We contacted 3 very reputable modular firms. This was in lieu of a public bid, and saw what they had available, worked with their pricing, how they would install them, all the construction budget with it. And tonight, you're going to see that we are recommending a firm called EMOD LLC. They had the most competitive pricing. We figure this budget will be about $1.5 million, and there's lots of contingency in there, as you'll see. And a lot of the contingency is because when we begin to work with the City of Dublin to make this happen, the city has always been a phenomenal partner for us, but depending when modulars go, the drainage and the site work that needs to be done to make sure it's good for the school, good for the city, there's a lot of unknowns as we work quickly through this. But the slide you'll see up ahead, now this is a sky view of Jerome, and the buildings attached right to the south, those are our current modulars. And then you'll see this is where we're recommending the next set of modulars go. One, we would like to keep all the modulars together because we're going, at the same time we're working on these modulars, we're concurrently working on an addition, and that's the main focus. So our plan is to recommend a designer for the addition to the board next month. So we're interviewing, we have a team put together to interview the designer. Mrs. Schwanke's on that team, myself, Tom McDonald, Shalina McConnell, and we're going to be interviewing a number of firms, make a recommendation, but we would like them to build an addition, not here. So we want to keep all the modulars together so we can build an addition somewhere else on Jerome at the same time. So when we flip the switch on the addition, we can start taking down the modulars all at the same time. The modulars we have got here is a set of 12. This was the most competitive price. It just worked out that actually prices that were higher actually had less modulars, they had less classrooms. I think it was 10 that they had. So we'll be working with the city on all types of things. We're going to be working with Washington Township. We've already reached out to them. We've already reached out to the city. They all know we're going to be on a very tight timeline, and we're confident that we'll be able to put this together. Our next step is part of this resolution. It'll give authorization to myself and to Brian Kern, our treasurer, to begin negotiation and settle the contract for this not to exceed amount. So our hope is to have that contract done in the next week and a half to 2 weeks, and then start very quickly on getting these modulars procured and working along with that. And again, our next steps is this Jerome addition piece. We've got it down to a short list of 3 designers, all very reputable, all good standing, and we'll be interviewing them, I believe, at the end of this week with a recommendation, hopefully at our next board meeting on that. And then it'll be, and that addition there, we're looking to not only provide enough space to mitigate all these additional classrooms, but also to see what they have in mind for our common spaces. Again, the gymnasium and the cafeteria would also need some bit of expansion to handle those extra students.
Jeff, out of curiosity, obviously where the modulars are is the greatest lot of land that probably directly connects to the building. Clearly the architects are going to present what they present to you. You're going to bring information back to us, but is the space that we're potentially talking about with the additions ample enough, or is it going to be in multiple sites? Can you go a little bit into that?
That's a great question. So Jerome was originally built, was plumbed for an addition, and it was up by the parking lot a little further, northwest of here. So it was originally plumbed for that. And then there's another space on the other side of the building that you can put an addition as well. This space, I believe, was originally chosen for the modulars, and I wasn't here at the very beginning, but more at the tail end when they got, is because I do know that the City of Dublin often liked modulars off the beaten path, where you can't really see them from the street, and that's how we've done them at others. And so that's why that's here. So I do think there'll be a couple of other options we can make for an addition that won't conflict with this.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Stark?
No, so you alluded to it at the beginning. Last time we did the modulars, it was a very long, painful process. So hopefully this goes a little bit quicker this time, and we can meet the deadlines that you've laid out, because obviously this is needed before the beginning of the
Well, we have a
school
much
year
different
next year.
team here this time, and we're confident that the team we have is the same one that closed it up when we got hired. So I'm fairly confident, and I also know there was a lot of mishaps with dealing with the city and things, getting people late involved. And with the City of Dublin, you always want to get them involved at the very start, and that's how we did it with our elementary schools or with the preschool, and they've been phenomenal to work with. And as a courtesy to them, they need to be involved at the very beginning, because again, we do things in a bubble, then we find out we have to redo them. We don't work that way, so I'm confident.
Okay. Yeah, and I think one of the problems last time around was the wrong engineering drawings were submitted for the footers. So,
Yes.
so these will be, I'll say, lack of better words, a permanent installation with footers and electrical and.
Yeah, so
all the
another
safety
thing with this
security.
EMOD, They come with a turnkey solution, so the other people we would have to RFQ, a designer and everyone else, they come with their own set that comes with this. And actually, Upper Arlington just used them. They're one of they had a number of strong references, UA being one of them. So they'll come, they'll work along with us, with the city, making sure that everything that's necessary to have will be done.
Okay, thank you.
All right. It's recommended by the superintendent, the Board of Education approve the attached resolution waiving competitive bidding for procurement of modular classrooms for Jerome High School. Is there a motion? So moved. Moved by Mrs. May, second by Mr. Harris. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. May?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Melody?
Yes.
Mr. Weininger?
Yes.
And Mr. Valentine?
Yes. Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Department of Human Resources.
Good evening, members of the board. I'm going to start with the certified agenda. Just to start out, Jeff had mentioned this, but Amy Thaler's resignation is on the agenda for your approval tonight. And then her backfill, Brian Killian, who's a current assistant transportation coordinator, is on the agenda to fill this opening. We're currently working to fill this vacancy in our transportation department. There's also a teacher resignation. It dates back to May. It was not included during the summer, but should have been, so it's on for your approval. We also have a handful of certified substitutes that are on the agenda. Most of them are school district nurse subs, working with Mr. Andrus, and they're helping us with contact tracing in our buildings. There are a few more 6-period pay classes to approve. We have some summer assessment team requests and then 2 extended time approvals for the 21-22 school year. And then the last thing on the certified agenda, there's 5 supplemental resignations, a few salary changes, and then fall-winter athletic supplemental contracts, then academic and extracurricular supplementals for the academic year. Any questions on the certified portion? Okay. Moving on to the classified agenda. We do have 5 resignations and 3 retirements on the agenda. Tammy Aquino is retiring from Kaufman High School with 25 years of service in our district. We want to thank her for her service. Teresa Trees is retiring from Davis Middle School with 9 years of service. And then David Lakin is retiring with 2 years of service from Glacier Ridge. We have 6 new hires that are joining our classified ranks. And then you'll see several salary changes and then a few unpaid leave of absences that are on for your approval. There are also 2 new job descriptions. The first is an assistant records compliance officer that will provide assistance in our enrollment center to Edie Carton, very busy place. And the second is a reclassification for an administrative support specialist position that provides support to Mrs. Schwanke and Dr. Hamilton. All right, and then the last section is on stipends. There are 16 stipends on this agenda. One of these was previously approved by the board at an earlier date, but due to a change in staff members, is being resubmitted for your approval. The rest of them are approval of our resident educator mentors and lead mentors that are providing support for newly hired teachers in our district. We also have approval for first-year Dublin mentors on there. Then there are several content leads throughout the district and other academic programming for the school year. And that concludes our portion. Any questions at all for the board, from the board?
Nope. Thank you. It's recommended by the superintendent, the Board of Education approve items 12A, 12B, and 12C. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Weininger. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Harris. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Weininger?
Yes.
Mr. Harris? Yes. Mr. Melody?
Yes.
Mrs. May?
Yes.
And Mr. Valentine?
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Office of Public Information, Mr. Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Valentine. Good evening, everyone. I just want to use my time this evening to plug some upcoming events. Just a reminder that this Wednesday is family night. Dr. Marshausen has asked staff to go easy on the homework, and we're just encouraging everybody to spend time with their families on Wednesday evening. On Friday evening is our Hall of Fame induction. It's at Dublin Jerome this year, 5 o'clock. The inductees will be in the parade at 5:45. The ceremony starts. So everybody's invited to that. I'd like to invite the public to that. We are highlighting Jerome graduates this year, and there are 8 fantastic people that are getting inducted, so it should be a great ceremony. Look forward to that. And then a week from Wednesday, the 22nd, is Operation Street Smart at Dublin Kaufman at 7 p.m. That's a great free program put on by the Franklin County Sheriff's Office. So again, I encourage everyone to attend that program. Last thing I'll mention is Dr. Marshausen's podcasts have over 1,000 downloads. So it has been popular. The ratings are good, and we're going to keep putting those out every Monday. Thank you.
Items for board discussion? Future agenda items. All right. Public participation for action items not on the agenda. We've got 12 people signed up this evening. Before we begin, I'd like to read a quick statement. As a Board of Education, we recognize the value of public comment and the importance of allowing members of the public to express themselves on school matters of community interest. We're also committed to conducting our meetings in a productive and efficient manner. So before we begin our participation this evening, I want to take a moment to review our board policy on this topic. Our board policy sets the following rules. Public speakers are required to register in advance and are required to begin their statement. Typically, I would ask for the first and last name as well as address. This evening, you are free to just include your first name. Each statement is limited to 3 minutes. You'll see a timer on the board. Please be respectful. We're going to try and get through as many folks as we can tonight, and a part of that is being respectful for the other folks who are in attendance that would like to speak as well. Comments that are frivolous, repetitive, or harassing may be prohibited or stopped. Comments must be related to action items on the board's agenda or off the board's agenda in this case. Comments that are off topic, obscene, or personal threatening attacks will be prohibited. State and federal student privacy laws prevent the district from disclosing information related to any student. You will not be permitted to discuss individual students during public participation. During public participation, each member of the public should direct their comments to the board as a whole. Consistent with our policy, this is not a time to question individual board members or district employees. It is also not a time for audience interaction or reaction. Meeting attendees are required to be silent unless it is their turn to speak. If this does not happen, we will not be able to run an efficient meeting, and we will have to stop public participation. If you would like to communicate with the board regarding topics, please feel free to email us, contact the district office. We'd be more than glad to listen to your concerns, whatever they may be. We will read any comments that you send to us. For example, we will not always have action items on our agenda related to COVID and safety protocols, but we know that this is of interest to many community members, and we welcome you to email us with your input, thoughts, questions, and suggestions. With that said, we will start this evening with Jen.
Hello, my name is Jen. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak this evening. A week ago, Dublin City Schools had 86 students test positive for COVID, 19 of which were at Davis Middle School. It feels like we've been trying to bring our concerns about COVID to your attention for months in order to avoid outbreaks like this. And yet you displayed the ability to act decisively when your own safety was on the line, requesting a police presence and delaying the release of streamed coverage of tonight's meeting. When asked why Dublin City Schools was the only district in Central Ohio to have a partial mask mandate, the response was that it was not warranted because the cases at each high school were still in the single digits. If this board applied the same reactive approach toward their own safety that they do toward mandating masks in our high schools, how many of us here would need to be injured before the police would be called? It's a ridiculous comparison intended to illustrate that waiting to act usually gives disastrous results. You don't want anyone here to be injured, nor do you want these proceedings to become a spectacle, any more than Dublin families want to be exposed to COVID. But what's happened is that you listen to a vocal minority of parents freak out over a piece of cloth that you yourself strongly recommend. You allowed them to dictate policy under the guise of listening to both sides. And what was the result? Your most socioeconomically diverse middle school had over 22% of the district's COVID cases, as well as those in quarantine. Do you know what happens when an hourly wage earner has to stay home with a sick or quarantined student? They can't earn money. They lose income. So while our wealthiest residents loudly complain about their children having to wear masks, our board gives in, ignoring the needs of students attending our only middle school east of the river for the sake of the 6% and the political aspirations of our board members. Were mask freedom not the pet project of certain board members and the 6% they serve, we would probably be discussing the strain on resources, both monetary and human, that the lack of mitigation strategies has cost the district. We would be discussing the shortages of substitute teachers, absentee rates, and the number of teachers currently needing to teach more than one class at a time. We might even be able to see CATS data on the district's COVID dashboard. Our board has the ability to mandate masks and create policy that helps to stop the spread of communicable diseases, to stay a step ahead of COVID outbreaks instead of waiting for them to happen. Please mandate masks now for all Dublin students, teachers, and staff. COVID is not over just because you're tired of hearing about it. Thank you.
Next up, Nicole.
Good evening. My name is Nicole, and I come here tonight to urge you to do everything within your power to continue to keep our children safe. I could not watch on the sidelines any longer. I, like everyone else, have been making my way through this pandemic, trying to keep myself and my loved ones safe. I am tired. I, too, want things to be normal again, but we just aren't there yet. I am not much different than anyone else here in Dublin. I'm a mother of a not yet vaccinated 11-year-old sixth grader at Sells Middle School. I'm a healthcare worker who has been working as a physical therapist throughout this pandemic, wearing my mask every single day, all day long. And I am a concerned Dublin resident, concerned for the safety and wellness, not only for my family, but for everyone else as well. I did not come here tonight to talk statistics and numbers. I am here to share my experience over the last year and a half. We chose for my son to be part of the Remote Learning Academy last year. I am pleased to say we had a positive experience, and I am very grateful for that. But it was time for him to come back into the classroom. He was starting middle school. This in itself is stressful enough without a pandemic. After a year plus of being out of the classroom, the emotional and social ramifications were taking its toll. I am certain that many other parents have had the same experience. We needed our kids back in the classroom with their peers, learning with their teachers in front of them. And if that meant they needed to be masked, then so be it. We did this with the belief that they were going to be safe, or at least as safe as possible given an ongoing pandemic. Are we being as safe as possible in our Dublin City schools? Is there more we can do? I'm happy to say that our sales numbers are steady at the moment. I had the opportunity to speak to our principal, Mr. Max Sock-Lieben. He answered my concerned email with an actual phone call on a Friday afternoon. This speaks volumes to me of how serious he takes keeping our kids safe. I'm sure this is true across our district. I am asking you tonight to give the resources to our school leaders and make the policies necessary to keep our schools as safe as possible. We need to be proactive in our schools, not reactive, as the numbers rise around us. As we have heard tonight, our high school numbers may not be high now, but for how long? Our best defense is against COVID-19 right now, especially for our children who cannot be vaccinated, are masking, distancing, and disinfecting frequently touched surfaces. You have the power to do this, to make changes in the schools now. Please consider mandating masks for all of our students and staff, K through 12. This is how we slow the spread and how we keep our children safe. I trusted all of you to keep my son safe when I brought him back into the classroom. Please do all that you are able to now. I thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight.
Next up, Emily.
Thank you for your time. As a parent of 2 Davis students, I am here to express my concern for what appears to be a lack of a plan for increased mitigation tactics surrounding an outbreak of COVID at our schools. Unfortunately, Davis Middle School has become the canary in the coal mine regarding the district's failure to plan beyond our standard mitigation tactics. Last week, I was shocked to learn that the district does not track cases by grade level and could only successfully contact trace 20% of the cases at Davis. The rest went unidentified. It has no plan to respond to an outbreak beyond work with Franklin County Public Health on a plan. We are 18 months into a pandemic, and the best DCS has to offer is to work with Franklin County Public Health. How is there no plan or policy in place at the district at this time to deal with an outbreak at the school? Franklin County Public Health routinely sets guidance for these issues, but the school district has the responsibility to set a policy. Our goals are the same. Our kids need to be in school. They need to feel safe. And we want to keep schools open by having good mitigation in place and a plan to reduce cases if they start rising in the building. We cannot do this if the board and the administration continues to fail to plan and lead. At minimum, the district should have a catastrophic plan in place at this time for buildings to utilize when experiencing rapidly increasing cases of COVID. There should be a percentage of students with COVID and or in quarantine that triggers the closure of a school, or at least a 10-day quarantine period to help stop the spread and mitigate the escalation. This should be coupled with testing of students before return. It could also be coupled with online learning, or we could utilize emergency closure days to extend the school year into June if needed. In addition, a prepared plan should also exist between normal mitigation tactics and this catastrophic plan. As cases rise, mitigation measures should as well. There is no reason to get to the point of closure for the district to react. Additional measures include increased testing, the elimination of modified quarantine, lunch in classrooms or outside with increased spacing. In addition, additional messaging parents should all occur in this interim space. Parents shouldn't have to request percentage data for quarantines and cases. This should be provided on the dashboard. The dashboard should also include grade level information, percentage of schools impacted, and the contact tracing data that is missing from there currently. Without proper planning, the district once again fails at both leadership and transparency. There is no plan. It's convenient because it also provides no accountability for the leadership team. It leaves our students vulnerable to not only illness, but loss of access to education and loss of qualified teachers if they're quarantined. It leaves parents questioning if their educational choices are, if they no longer feel safe that school is for their student. At a public district, you are tasked with providing a safe and equitable access to education for our students. You are tasked with providing leadership and transparency. You achieve this by having a plan and establishing policies that provide this for our students. How are we 18 months into a pandemic and still without an actual plan? How quickly can you rectify this and actually share it transparently with us, the parents of the district? Thank you.
Next up, Gabriella.
My mask is stuck. There we go. This is what long earrings will get to you. My name is Gabriella. I am a nurse at a local hospital. I have a master's in public health, but today I'm here speaking to you, board members, because I'm a mom of 3 kids in the Dublin City school system. I'm here to ask you to improve the transparency and accuracy in the district's COVID-19 communication, to implement stronger prevention and mitigation strategies, and to form a COVID-19 DCS task force that involves district parents. We are past the 18-month mark on this pandemic, and the threat of the Delta variant gets bigger by the day. Children now make up more than 26% of new COVID-19 cases. And in Ohio, as of September 9th, the state reported almost 7,000 new cases among school students. This is extremely scary, especially considering the school year just started less than a month ago. Infection rates at Dublin City schools are escalating, as we can see from the recent outbreak at Davis Middle School. My question to you today is, apart from the DCS partial K-8 mask mandate, what is being done by DCS to control the spread of the virus? I would like clear communication and transparency on this matter. The only communication I have access to is the case notification emails and the COVID-19 dashboard. The emails from my kids' schools are not always consistent, and the dashboard is messy at best. Parents, students, and staff deserve to know accurate data and also what specific mitigation strategies are being put in place. For example, I'm very happy to hear that outdoor seating is being put in place at Davis. Will outdoor lunch be a controlled strategy at all schools or only after outbreaks occur? What about taking some classes outdoors while the weather allows? Many districts around the country are being very creative in their use of outdoor spaces to prevent the spread in their schools. What are we, one of the best funded school districts in our state, doing to lead the way? We need to be proactive rather than reactive. What about clear pathways outlined for the schools to follow when cases and quarantines get to certain levels? Last year, we had clear benchmarks for when school could be in person, hybrid, or remote. Are we going to have to wait for outbreaks before these pathways are created? DCS has stated that you will work with Franklin County Public Health on outbreak matters, but they only set guidance, not policy, and the policy is up to you to set in place. I, along with many other concerned parents, are not seeing the situation as a political battle or a fight for our so-called freedoms, but rather a fight for our children's well-being and health. We put their lives in your hands 5 days a week. We want to be involved in helping the district control the virus. You have many district parents with many talents that will be willing to share their time and creativity to help kids' schools on this grave matter, myself included. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, Brian.
Good evening. I'm so pleased to follow Gabriella. I haven't met her yet, but it turns out that our audience has more public health expertise than your medical advisory panel. She has an MPH. You've got a panel full of physicians who have no public health expertise at all. We've heard tonight a number of times how we're going to follow Franklin County Public Health, but Franklin County Public Health has given you guidance on what to do when there is a COVID exposure on a sports team. And I had my son at watching a sports event at the schools recently, went in to just see what was going on and immediately pulled him out of there because that was not a safe environment for any of our children. I came to find, from the lack of mask wearing, both from players who were doing nothing but sitting in the stands watching, to other parents, to volunteers working the concession stand, to the janitor cleaning up the floor in the area that they were playing. I followed up on that to find out that if our kids are exposed while they're playing that game, even in a school building, our schools are not doing any contact tracing. Those exposures are outside the school day, and those are not included in our numbers, and those kids do not result in quarantines of other players. Franklin County Public Health has told you that if you have an exposure on a sports team, a contact sports team, every player should be quarantined. That is a high exposure, that there's no 15-minute rule. If you're a contact sport team member and there's an exposure on the team, the coach and every player should be quarantined. That's not happening. Our schools are ignoring all of those cases. Franklin County Public Health is where there are public health experts. Those are epidemiologists. Your medical panel is physicians. That you rely on that panel and you continue to peddle that advice while you ignore the actual experts that are in our community. And I find that disappointing. There's a bigger context here that we are ignoring. I know that we are here about schools and our kids, and we all are worried about the kids, but we also live in the city of Dublin. We live in the state of Ohio. We are a community, and we're in a crisis as a community. And we have an opportunity to do something to help nip some of that issue in the bud here in our community and help our neighbors, help those people who are waiting for an ICU bed at the hospital by doing everything we can to try to mitigate this disease here in our schools. And I would encourage you to think about the larger community and do what we can to help, even if you don't see that number is going to impact an individual child in the classroom, but maybe it's going to save their grandparent. And I would appreciate you putting in the effort and showing some leadership on those issues. Thank you so much.
Next up, Michael.
Members of the board and Dr. Marshausen, good evening and thank you for your time. The petition that I'm going to be referring to tonight was posted on the evening of August 31st, and by the next morning had received over 400 signatures, all from Dublin residents. It was forwarded to the board, and the only people who've responded to date have been Dr. Marshausen and Mrs. May, and now has over 800 signatures. And the petition reads, "We, the undersigned residents, demand that the Dublin City Schools Board of Education implement a mask mandate for all students, staff, and teachers in Dublin City schools through grade 12. A mask mandate is in place for preschool through 8th grade currently, and we demand that this mandate be extended to all grades based on the most recent scientific and local health data. Given new evidence on the Delta variant, the CDC has updated the guidance for fully vaccinated people. The CDC recommends universal indoor masking for all teachers, staff, students, and visitors to K through 12 schools, regardless of vaccination status. Franklin County Public Health and Columbus Public Health have issued the same recommendation. The Delta variant is more infectious and is leading to increased transmissibility when compared with other variants. Research proves that wearing masks reduces the transmission of this variant. Strongly recommending that high school students wear masks has not achieved the intended goal. For example, on August 20th, 2021, at 9 a.m., only 9 students, approximately 10%, were wearing masks in the crowded Dublin Jerome High School Commons. The attendance clerk, SRO, and administrative office staff were unmasked. A student-facilitated research study at Kaufman High School revealed that an average of 17.5% of students were wearing masks in classes. Teenagers are known to be risk takers, and placing the responsibility on students to decide whether or not to mask is developmentally inappropriate. Community transmission of COVID-19 is high. Ohio Governor Mike DeWine urged Ohio K-12 schools to implement mask mandates on August 17th. Because of Senate Bill 22, only local school boards have the power to mandate masks in school, as referenced in Section 3313.67 of the Ohio Revised Code, which reads, in part, the Board of Education of each city, exempted village, or local school district may make and enforce such rules to secure the immunization of and to prevent the spread of communicable diseases among the pupils attending or eligible to attend the schools of the district, as in its opinion the safety and interest of the public require. Please join the leaders of the majority of districts in Central Ohio in taking action to protect our community, including our vulnerable students, by issuing a mask mandate for all students, staff, and teachers in Dublin City schools through grade 12. Thank you for your time.
Carlos.
Good evening, everybody. And thank you for the opportunity to speak here tonight. In June, DCS released its fall safety protocols, and it was a return to pre-pandemic standards because local data looked really good, right? Immediately following that release, dozens of parents started sounding the alarm. Delta was coming. It was 225% more contagious than Alpha, and it was affecting children more profoundly than the virus ever had before. The CDC and all the major health organizations recommended universal masking. We watched as Columbus, UA, Hilliard, Westerville, Bexley, Worthington all took action to at least protect their most vulnerable students with a mask mandate for grades pre-K through 8. As Delta started to surge across Ohio and local data diminished, strangely, parents had to wage a furious email campaign and protest publicly only to get our Board of Ed to enact the bare minimum, a pre-K through 8 mask mandate with exemptions so liberal that they only required an advisement that masking was inappropriate for their child. So let's fast forward to the last few weeks of school. Over 100 children COVID positive and hundreds more are in quarantine. Why? Because the district, in my opinion, lacked the courage to follow public health guidance. At Davis, your lunch protocols have resulted in dozens of sick and quarantined kids. Dr. Marshausen has acknowledged their failings and ordered more lunch tables. He also asked his principals to look for more space to properly social distance, and for that we thank him. His response is simply not good enough, unfortunately. If this district listened to the infectious disease specialist instead of an ill-informed 6% of loud parents from the district's most affluent area, these practices would have been in place from day one. So we're at a crossroads. COVID cases continue to surge. All major health organizations are still recommending universal masking. Bexley, Gahanna, Westerville, et cetera, and Hilliard all now have universal masking. Yet here at Dublin is again at the absolute bottom of the pack, which is incredible to me. In fact, in our school district, teachers are being encouraged to go maskless. This week at Jerome High School, a maskless, unvaccinated teacher tested positive, exposing countless children and testing their vaccine deficiency for no reason. Kaufman teachers succumbed to breakthrough cases. Students will be next. They will be. For once, let's be a district that takes proactive steps to safeguard our kids' health, not the reactive district we have become.
Please wrap up your comments.
Can I finish? I'm almost finished.
We have to move on to the next person, please.
Okay, well, thank you. Last comment I'm going to make is that please, let's be the Dublin difference. I moved into this area about 8 years ago because I heard so much about the
I'm trying to
Dublin
get through
difference.
everybody this evening.
It seems like we're becoming more the Dublin indifference.
Please cut off the
and we
mic.
have to change that. So thank you.
I'm trying my best to make sure that everybody who signed up spoke this evening, and so I would appreciate if we can continue to try and be respectful for the other speakers to keep our comments at 3 minutes. Mark.
Thank you. I'd like to start with a simple message for the teachers of our district. It is your job to educate, not indoctrinate. Educate, not indoctrinate. And I'd like to have a few examples related to that topic. These are incidents that happened in our school district already this year. There was a 4th grade class at Depp Elementary where the teacher asked all the students to line up in a row and in front of their peers announce their pronoun. They are 9 years old. In 8th grade, there was English language arts survey. Question was, imagine your ideal relationship and what does your partner do to make you feel loved? One of the answers was, prioritize intimacy and active sexual connection with me. These are 14-year-olds. And in an 8th grade class in Eversole, there was an exercise where they were listing all the qualities within their classroom, and the teacher wrote personal pronouns. I'm told that all these issues were addressed, but there's going to be more of these instances, and I think the parents of this district deserve to know what kind of disciplinary action has been taken on these teachers and will be taken in the future. And because we just simply can't have this in our classrooms. We cannot introduce sexuality to our students in K through 12, especially 9-year-olds. And what does that even have to do with educating our children? There are ways to teach equality and empathy without introducing sexuality and pronouns in the classroom. So again, just do your job and educate, don't indoctrinate. On the COVID topic, I'd actually like to commend the district for allowing parents and students to make medical decisions for themselves. You've had the option to opt out of masks all year, and it has not led to a massive spread of COVID cases. In fact, there are 0 Dublin students hospitalized right now for COVID, but we do have students hospitalized for mental health issues. Mass and isolation is a bigger threat.
Please, I announced at the beginning of the meeting, and I'll give you more time here. Please refrain from clapping.
Mask and isolation is a bigger threat to our students than the virus itself. And in terms of our teachers, when they are not wearing a mask, the students can hear them better, they can see their facial expressions, they can see them smile. This is a positive thing. This is good that we're getting back to a more normal learning environment for our students. So I think districts should actually be commended for this. And I want to thank Dr. Marchausen and the board for continuing to allow parents and students to make medical decisions for themselves. I know that this is going to be difficult to keep this going because of the public pressure that you are feeling, but I hope that it stays this way. So thank you.
Thank you. Jeff.
Hi there, Jeff Hartley, Scottish Corners, general around Dublin guy. Thank you, Dr. Bailey, for the SMART goals and data-driven. I think that is hugely important, and those efforts are noteworthy. Thank you. I think it relates to the current topic around transparency, and the previous speaker, I have some of the same concerns in terms of transparency, being specific. Thank you to Dr. Marchhausen for the podcasts and you know, sharing sort of all the positivity going on. I accept Dr. Hamilton's invitation for meetings, and I would actually encourage that to solve the previous speaker and my concerns around, you know, educate, don't indoctrinate, how to avoid some of the nastier political ramifications of some of those subjects is to be specific, have data-driven SMART goals. What sort of programming do we want to bring in that does teach the empathy, that does teach a lot of the diversity, the inclusion, the equality, and really just be specific. Data-driven SMART goals, public comment periods, the tools like Thought Exchange are fantastic. The surveys are fantastic. If you want to build up the data, you ask people. Get some of the, you know, those of us that may have a little hotter opinions on one side or the other, let's let those breathe a little bit, get people talking, and until we can get to the point that maybe we can have some public forums on these sorts of things. And again, get the data out there, get people talking about it. And at the end of the day, SMART goals are the right way to provide that transparency and maybe let some cooler heads prevail in this. So thank you.
Last speaker for the evening, Mike.
Mike Bolin, 7068 Greenland Place. There's just a few COVID-related topics that I'm concerned about. So my first grader, he was bringing his lunch to school every day. Kids were harassing him about a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, so he just came home, wouldn't eat his lunch, you know, not the end of the world. My wife asked if he could sit next to his best friend at lunch and was told no because of contact tracing. My wife was told the kids got to pick their seats on the first day. So, I mean, I'm like, really? Like, he knew who he's going to sit by, how he was going to get harassed, you know, whatever. But, you know, we won't let the kids get out of the situation that's bothering them right now because of contact tracing. I find that kind of a little ridiculous. But, I mean, it goes back to kind of the mental health. What is this doing to the kids' social, emotional, and mental health long term? You know, my first grader, he hates school right now, absolutely hates going in, fights us every day about it, and I'm really concerned of keeping him in school. I'm really concerned that keeping him in school was the best decision. I think, you know, him not having to wear a mask is the only thing that's saving that right now. I'd asked the principal to handle this, but anything COVID related, I've communicated on some other issues, and I always get the same thing. The district follows the quarantine procedure and tracking protocols established by Franklin County Public Health. I've talked about this before, but I'd really like for there to be a DCS town hall style meeting, kind of like this, where everybody comes in, and we as parents can ask the health department officials specific questions. Finally, another topic is just the emails, the COVID case emails. They're pretty general emails, just, one case in Glacier Ridge Elementary School, one COVID case. I'd either like the ability to opt out of the COVID case emails because I don't really find them useful, or could we get some more information on the individual cases? For example, did the students have symptoms? Did they recover? How long did it take to recover? Did they require hospitalization? What age are they? Did they have pre-existing conditions? If so, what were those conditions? Were medications given that helped, that all parents can use? So just, more details that would help tell the story a little better. The details always tell the stories, and to me, I'm just seeing a bunch of generalizations, so I just like more information if it's possible, or just get off the emails, because I get them for other things, and like I said, it's just not useful, and that's it. Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you. That concludes our public participation for action items not on the agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Mrs. May. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Weiniger. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes 5.